I remember the first time I saw her. It was late spring, just after one of those quiet Midwest rains that makes the pavement shimmer like glass. I was walking into this small used bookstore in downtown Cincinnati, the kind with creaky floors and shelves packed so tight you had to turn sideways to pass. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped in. And there she was. She was standing in the poetry section, her finger tracing the spine of an old Rainer Maria Rilke book like it was something holy. She had this soft brown hair tied up in a loose knot, a black cardigan hanging off one shoulder, and the kind of eyes that made everything else fade out, not just blue, but stormy, like they were holding something back. I didn't say anything at first. Just watched her smile at the pages like the words were speaking only to her. I grabbed a random book off the shelf and pretended to read, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. Finally, she looked up. Caught me staring. "You're not really reading that," she said. I froze. Then looked down at the cover. It was advanced accounting. I laughed. "You caught me." She tilted her head, smiling. "Well, either you're a really confused poet, or you're trying to impress someone. I think it's both." That's how it started. With a joke in a dusty bookstore. Her name was Claire. She was a literature student finishing her MFA, obsessed with Sylvia Plath and early 20th century French cinema. I was in software, boring, reliable, logical. But with her, I felt like anything could happen. We started meeting up, casually at first. A coffee shop here, a walk along the Ohio River there. She told me stories about her childhood in Vermont, how her mom used to wake her up at 2 a.m. just to watch meteor showers. I told her about my brother who I lost in college and how I hadn't really let myself feel anything since then. Somehow, with her, I could say things I hadn't said out loud in years. She made me feel like a person again. Our relationship unfolded like a movie. Every moment felt like a scene I never wanted to end. Sunday mornings making pancakes in her apartment, dancing barefoot in the kitchen to old jazz records. Late night drives with no destination, singing badly to Springsteen with the windows down. Her head on my shoulder at the planetarium, whispering constellations. Claire loved the world fiercely. She noticed things most people walked past. "Look at that," she'd say, pointing at the way light spilled through tree branches or the curve of an old woman's hands on a park bench. She made the ordinary feel sacred. And being loved by her, it was like being seen for the first time. I think I fell in love with her the night it snowed in April. We were supposed to go to this gallery opening, but the storm hit hard and fast. She came over to my place instead, cheeks red, hair tangled from the wind, carrying a bag of old movies and 2 bottles of cheap wine. "Plans are overrated," she said, kicking off her boots. "Let's just be warm." We built a fort in my living room like we were kids again. Blankets, pillows, a flashlight for a lantern. We watched Casablanca on my laptop while the snow came down outside, and sometime around midnight, she leaned in, kissed me soft and slow, and said, "This feels like home." That night, I memorized the way her breath sounded as she slept, the rise and fall of her chest under the blankets. I knew then, deep in my bones, that I loved her. That I would give everything I had to keep her safe, to make her laugh, to never let her feel alone. The days turned into months, and love grew between us like ivy. Not fast or loud, but steady, climbing over every scar I thought would never heal. We talked about moving in together, about getting a dog, about one day maybe leaving the city and starting fresh somewhere by the ocean. I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in my life, the future didn't look like a fog. It looked like her. It started with her forgetting words. Little ones at first: spatula, charger, laundry detergent. She'd pause mid-sentence, squint like she was trying to see through a fog, and then laugh it off. "My brain's just tired," she'd say. "Too many sonnets and not enough sleep." I wanted to believe her. But it didn't stop. She began sleeping more, 10, 12 hours at a time, and still waking up exhausted. Some days she wouldn't get out of bed at all. The girl who once dragged me outside in the middle of thunderstorms just to dance barefoot in puddles. She was now curling into herself like the world was too loud. One morning, I found her standing in the kitchen, holding her coffee mug under the faucet, waiting. The water wasn't running. She looked at me with a strange softness, like she couldn't remember why she was there. "I think I was going to boil something," she whispered. That's when something inside me snapped. "Claire," I said gently, "we need to see someone." She resisted. Of course she did. Claire was always strong, always smiling through the worst. She hated hospitals, hated being treated like she was fragile. But the fear in her eyes betrayed her. She knew something wasn't right. She just didn't want to name it. The tests started soon after. Blood work, scans, neurological exams. I held her hand through it all, pretending I was calm, pretending the ground wasn't shifting under my feet. She cracked jokes to the nurses, wore red lipstick to every appointment like she was going to a gala, not a clinic. But I saw the way her fingers trembled when she signed the forms. Weeks passed, then months, and the answers didn't come. Instead, more questions, more confusion. It could be early-onset Alzheimer's, one doctor said, or an autoimmune condition, possibly a neurological disorder we don't fully understand yet. Every word felt like a punch in the gut. Claire was only 31. Some days, she was almost herself. We'd make grilled cheese and watch documentaries and fall asleep tangled up like nothing had changed. Other days, she'd forget my name, just for a moment, but long enough to leave a crack in me I didn't know how to fix. The worst was watching her know she was slipping. "I feel like I'm disappearing," she said one night, curled in my hoodie on the fire escape, watching the city lights blur. "Like I'm a dream someone is forgetting, piece by piece." I didn't know what to say, so I just wrapped my arms around her and held on. Her body started to fail next. Subtle things at first, dropping a glass, struggling to hold a pen. Then bigger things. Walking became harder. Her balance was off. Once, I found her collapsed in the hallway, silent tears on her cheeks, too proud to call for help. We moved in together sooner than planned. I set up railings in the bathroom, bought a pill organizer, rearranged the furniture so there were no sharp corners. I learned how to cook her favorite meals from scratch and read to her every night, even when she was too tired to respond. But nothing I did could stop the slow erosion. It was like loving someone while they were being pulled out to sea, and all I could do was stand on the shore, screaming into the wind. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I was heating up leftover soup and the microwave beeped just as the phone buzzed. Her neurologist. He wanted to talk face to face. Claire squeezed my hand the whole car ride there. "Maybe it's good news," she said, though her voice barely had hope in it anymore. Maybe they found something treatable. But her knuckles were white against mine. The office was too quiet, too clean, too final. The doctor looked down at the folder, then up at us with that practiced expression, the kind that says, "I've delivered this news 100 times, but it never gets easier. We believe Claire is in the early stages of an aggressive neurodegenerative condition. There is no cure. At best, we can slow the progression." The room tilted. I couldn't breathe. Claire didn't cry. Not then. She just nodded. "Okay," she said softly, and I don't know how, but she thanked him. That night, she stared out our bedroom window for hours. I sat behind her, arms around her waist, heart breaking quietly. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant. "If I go, like really go, promise me you won't disappear too." I buried my face in her shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere." But the truth was she already was. After the diagnosis, something inside me cracked. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't explode. I didn't scream at the sky. It was slower than that. A slow suffocation. A silent slipping away of who I used to be. I stopped laughing. Stopped sleeping. I moved through each day like a ghost of the man she'd fallen in love with, smiling when she needed me to, holding her hand through the fog, pretending like I wasn't unraveling one breath at a time. My world narrowed to her. My job? I quit. Couldn't focus on lines of code while the person I loved most in the world was forgetting the color of her favorite dress. My friends? They called, at first. Texted. "Thinking of you. Let's grab a drink." But how do you go out for drinks when every night you're researching clinical trials that always end in the same sentence, "No known cure"? Claire needed me. And I needed to believe I could hold her together with my bare hands. The thing they don't tell you about loving someone through a terminal diagnosis is that you lose them twice. Once slowly, piece by piece, and then again, all at once. And that slow death? It kills you too. There were moments, small ones, that wrecked me in ways I can't put into words. One morning I found her in the hallway trying to put on my shoes. She looked up, confused and afraid. "I thought they were mine," she said, clutching the wall. Another time, she forgot we lived together. Asked if I could call her a cab to go home. Every time I told her it was okay, my voice stayed calm. I smiled. I reminded her. But later, when she was asleep or staring blankly at a wall, I'd sit in the bathroom with the shower running just so she wouldn't hear me fall apart. I hated that I was losing her. But worse, I hated that she knew it. She apologized constantly. For forgetting. For spacing out. For not being who she used to be. She'd say things like, "You didn't sign up for this, and I wouldn't blame you if you left." I always told her the same thing. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving." But the truth was, I was disappearing too. There was a mirror above our kitchen sink, and one night I caught a glimpse of myself, unshaven, pale, eyes like empty wells. I barely recognized the man staring back. A man haunted by every smile she no longer remembered, every piece of her slipping through his fingers. I had become a shadow, but I refused to stop fighting. I started reading to her every night poetry, even though she didn't always follow. I filled our apartment with sticky notes labeled with everything. Refrigerator. Couch. Toothbrush. Your Claire. I made flashcards with our memories. Our favorite songs. Our first date. Her mother's name. My name. I kept a journal, too, every day, no matter how painful. I wrote down everything she said, everything she forgot, everything I wanted her to remember. Even if one day it would only be me left holding it. But nothing I did was enough to stop the slide. Her body was changing now. More tremors. More fatigue. Some days, she could barely speak above a whisper. I started feeding her, bathing her, helping her dress. We stopped leaving the apartment. And still, I loved her. I loved her so much it hurt to breathe. But at night, when the lights were off and the world was quiet, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering the question I couldn't shake. Why is this happening to her? Why Claire? Why someone so full of life and art and joy? There had to be more. There had to be something they missed. Something wrong in the system. Some key no one had turned yet. I started digging. Online forums. Research journals. Neurology subreddits. I emailed specialists in Europe, paid for phone calls with clinics overseas, pored over every experimental treatment and obscure diagnosis I could find. I knew I wasn't a doctor. But I was smart, desperate, obsessed. And one night, somewhere between my third cup of coffee and the 100th article I'd read that week, I found something. A mention. A buried case study. A handful of patients misdiagnosed with degenerative disease when it was something else entirely. A rare, reversible neurological disorder. A thread of hope, tiny, fragile, flickering, but it was there. And suddenly, the shadow I had become felt a spark again. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere. But I knew this. I hadn't come this far to lose her without a war. I didn't sleep that night. The case study I found was buried in an obscure medical journal, an Italian neurologist describing 4 misdiagnosed patients. All had been told they had degenerative brain conditions. All had declined rapidly. All had been given expiration dates. But they were wrong. It wasn't Alzheimer's. Not Parkinson's. Not multiple system atrophy. It was something rarer. Something fixable. Autoimmune encephalitis. The body attacking the brain, inflammation, confusion, memory loss, speech issues, all the symptoms matched Claire. But here's the part that made my pulse hammer in my ears. It was treatable. If caught early, the brain could recover. With immunotherapy. Steroids. Time. Hope. I printed the study, highlighted every line, made notes in the margins. I compiled every symptom Claire had into a document, dates, videos, journal entries. I called the clinic at 7:03 a.m. and demanded to speak to someone. I was done being polite. Done waiting. The receptionist tried to brush me off. I wouldn't hang up. Eventually, a resident answered. I laid it all out. The case study. Claire's pattern. The fact that her decline was inconsistent, good days and bad days, improvements that came and went. That wasn't typical of Alzheimer's. That wasn't normal degeneration. He listened, skeptical but intrigued. They agreed to another round of tests. Blood panels. MRI. A lumbar puncture. I stayed beside Claire through all of it. She was tired, confused, sometimes angry. Why are we doing this again? She whispered one night as they wheeled her into another scan. Because I believe there's more to the story, I told her, gripping her hand. And then, 3 days later, the call came. I was in the hospital cafeteria, staring blankly at a vending machine when my phone buzzed. Dr. Harding's voice was calm, but I could hear it, that slight shift in tone. There are antibodies in her spinal fluid, he said. I didn't understand at first. What does that mean? It means, he said, slowly, that her immune system is attacking her brain. It's rare. But it's not degenerative. It's autoimmune. My heart slammed against my ribs. Is it reversible? With aggressive treatment, there's a chance she could recover. I dropped the phone. I don't even remember falling to my knees. Claire, my Claire, wasn't dying. I wanted to scream. Cry. Break something. Hug every nurse in the building. I wanted to run to her room and tell her everything, but she was asleep when I got there. So I just sat beside her and whispered, "You're coming back to me." I swear it. They started treatment the next morning. Steroids. IVIG. Hospital stays. Monitored every hour. I kept a notebook filled with progress markers. The first time she said my name again clearly. The first time she remembered her favorite tea. The first time she asked for a poem. There were setbacks. Days she slept through everything. Mornings when her hands still shook. But I felt it, she was climbing back. And I was there for every inch of that climb. A week into treatment, I confronted her original doctor, the one who'd told us there was nothing left to do. I wasn't angry for myself. I was furious for her. You were wrong, I said. You were going to let her fade away. He blinked, then lowered his gaze. Medicine isn't always black and white. But she is not a gray area. She is a person. She's Claire. And she matters. He didn't say anything. But it didn't matter. I wasn't there for an apology. I was there to reclaim her life. And in a small hospital room in Cincinnati, justice wasn't handed down by a courtroom or a judge. It was handed down by a miracle wrapped in science and a man who refused to stop looking for answers. The woman I fell in love with once quoted Leonard Cohen to me. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Claire survived. But neither of us came out the same. The treatments worked slowly, painfully. After 6 weeks of immunotherapy, the tremors began to ease. Her speech became clearer. One morning, she smiled at me with that half-laugh she used to give when I burned toast, and it hit me like a wave. She was still in there. But so much had changed. She had holes in her memory, entire months missing. Our favorite movies. Inside jokes. Whole stories we used to tell each other like bedtime rituals. Gone. Some came back. Some didn't. There were days she'd wake up crying, panicked, unsure of where she was. Days where she looked at me like I was someone she almost knew, like I was on the tip of her tongue but wouldn't quite come through. And it broke me. But I never let her see that. Instead, I became someone else. Not just for her, because of her. The man who once planned his life around routines, spreadsheets, and code now spent his nights researching cognitive therapies, holistic healing, and neuroplasticity. I studied brain anatomy. I learned how music could rebuild pathways. I sang to her, terribly, every morning. The man who used to fear emotions now held space for all of them: grief, rage, awe, joy. I cried openly. I told her I loved her even when I wasn't sure she remembered what love meant. The man who once measured success in salary and job titles now measured it in smaller victories. Today she remembered the word ocean. Yesterday she called me home. Last week she danced for 6 seconds in the kitchen when a Billie Holiday song came on. And me? I had stopped looking in mirrors. Because I wasn't him anymore, the man who once lived for comfort, for logic, for control. I had been stripped down to the rawest parts of myself. Fear had carved me. Love had remade me. I carried battle scars no one could see, but I wore them like armor. I started journaling not just for her, but for others. I launched a blog, shared our story. One night, my inbox filled with messages, families across the world who had lived the same thing. Misdiagnosis, misunderstandings, losing people who could have been saved. I realized I had found a new purpose. Not a replacement for who I was, but a rebirth. Because surviving something like this doesn't just change you. It rewrites your DNA. The old version of me would have walked past a stranger crying on a bench. Now I sit beside them. The old version of me loved Claire with the innocence of discovery. But the new version of me? He loves her with the soul-worn certainty of someone who's fought wars for her smile. One night, after a long, slow walk along the river where she managed half a mile without stumbling, we sat on a bench watching the water. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I don't remember everything, but I remember how safe I feel with you." I closed my eyes. That was enough. Maybe I'd never get the old Claire back, not completely. And maybe the man I used to be was gone, too. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes love doesn't bring you back to who you were. It shows you who you're meant to become. Sometimes I forget what life was like before her. Before the bookstore. Before the diagnosis. Before my world cracked open and let the light in. We live quietly now. Claire is stable. She still has bad days, but they're fewer, softer. Like the storm has passed, and only the occasional winds remain. Some memories are gone forever. Others float back when I least expect them, like the time we saw a couple dancing under a streetlight, and she whispered, "That was us, wasn't it?" We danced right there on the sidewalk. No music. No rush. Just her hand in mine and the city humming around us. But I know, I've always known, that we're living in borrowed time. Autoimmune encephalitis can relapse. Or maybe it won't. No one can say. The uncertainty used to terrify me. Now, it's simply part of the air I breathe. Because love, real love, is never safe. It's wild. It's brutal. It's beautiful. And it hurts. I used to think love was about happiness, compatibility, chemistry. But that was before I sat beside a hospital bed, watching the woman I love forget the color of my eyes. Now I know the truth. Love and pain are not opposites. They're twins. One gives the other its shape. You can't have one without the risk of the other. And that's what makes it real. We still go on walks slower now. We still read poetry, sometimes the same poem 5 times in a row because she forgets we've read it already. I never correct her. I just smile, hold the book closer, and read it like it's the first time. Every time. Sometimes she writes little notes and leaves them for me to find. On my desk, you're my safe place. In the fridge, I love how you cut the fruit. On the bathroom mirror, don't forget to love me even when I forget me. She always signs them with a little heart and a C. And I do love her. Not in spite of what we've been through, because of it. Pain gave our love shape. Loss gave it depth. And survival gave it meaning. I used to think I wanted the old Claire back. But that was grief talking. Because the woman in front of me now, with the scars, and the memory gaps, and the strength I can't begin to describe, she is everything. And I am not the same man who walked into that bookstore years ago. Back then, I thought love was about finding someone who made life easier. Now I know. Love is choosing someone again and again, even when everything gets harder. Claire may forget dates. She may lose words. But I remember for both of us. I remember the bookstore. The April snow. The first I love you. The fight. The fall. The climb. The way she said my name like it was home. And I'll keep remembering. As long as I have breath in my body. Because love and pain, they're not enemies. They're the same heartbeat. One breaks you. The other rebuilds you. And both are worth every second. So if you're listening to this now, maybe you're in love. Maybe you're losing someone. Maybe you're fighting for something you can't quite name. Just remember, the pain means it mattered. The love means it still does.